Welcome to episode 14 of The Culinary Citizen, a gastronomic guide to international relations. This is Sam Chappell-Sokol.
And Kelsey Marr. Each week we introduce you to a concept or theme connecting food and people around the world. This week we're speaking to Megan McGowan, the program manager for the League of Kitchens.
Welcome, Megan.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
So, a little bit of background on League of Kitchens. It is New York-based. It bills itself as a quote-unquote immersive culinary adventure in which guests go to the homes of immigrant cooks and learn to cook their cuisines. There are currently 9 instructors working with the organization from Argentina, Uzbekistan, Japan, Korea, Trinidad, Greece, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, India, and Lebanon. And when I think about all those countries, I get really hungry. Classes are either 2-hour introductions to a cuisine or immersive half-day experiences, which start with lunch prepared by the instructor and end with a dinner made by the guests with the chef's instruction. Guests are then sent home with recipes and a shopping guide so they can recreate the meal at home. League of Kitchens has been featured in a number of glowing news stories. The New York Times, PRI's The World did a cool story on it, The Splendid Table, of course. And founder Lisa Gross was even a guest on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, who, in a 2-part series, cooked and danced with Yamini Joshi, a cook from India who lives in Queens. So, welcome, Megan. Did I get all of that right?
Yeah, that was great. And thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you guys today.
Yeah, we're excited that you're here. So, let's start. Let's get a little bit of background. Can you tell us a bit about the origin of League of Kitchens, a little bit maybe around about Lisa Gross, who founded the organization, as well as how you yourself got involved with it?
Sure. So sort of the origin story is that Lisa comes from, her background is half Korean. So her grandmother and her mother are both Korean immigrants. Her father is a New Yorker of Hungarian Jewish descent. And growing up, her grandmother cooked amazing Korean food, but every time Lisa came into the kitchen to try to help or watch, she would sort of shoo her out of the kitchen and tell her that studying was more important. I think because she really wanted her to have opportunities that she did not have as a young woman. And so Lisa didn't learn to cook from her grandmother. And Lisa's mother actually also didn't learn to cook from her grandmother. And then when Lisa became older and became very interested in cooking and was doing a lot of cooking on her own and reading a lot of cookbooks, she would try to reproduce the things that her grandmother had made by cookbooks or recipes on the internet. And nothing tasted the same. There was just nothing was what she remembered. And she realized that there are things that you really need to learn from a person. Both techniques and certain specificities of ingredients, and just sort of how the cooking process feels, and that is knowledge that you don't get from a book or from the internet.
Right. There's so much touch and taste and all of those things that go on that you don't really get from reading a recipe. So
exactly. I mean, I think about when my mother makes meatballs, there's no point in the recipe where it says, taste the raw ground beef to see if it's salty enough, but that's what she does, you know. So Lisa's dream was to find a Korean grandmother that she could learn from, but not only a Korean grandmother, but grandmothers or skilled chefs from many different backgrounds. And so that's sort of how the League of Kitchens got founded, was this idea of how do we access and combine and like in one place this knowledge, this traditional cooking knowledge that otherwise gets lost when those people pass away or move away and don't pass that on.
So how did you get involved with it, Megan?
Yeah, so I joined about 1.5 years ago. So League of Kitchens has been operating for about 2.5 years. I joined 1.5 years ago when I just moved back from Italy. So I moved to Italy in 2012 to do a master's at the University of Gastronomic Sciences, which is in Palenzo, which is outside of Torino in Italy. So that is the university that was founded by Slow Food.
Right.
So you really get an exposure to everything that Slow Food does. So it's food production, tasting, anthropology, sociology, media, sort of a whole bunch of different concepts. And then I just fell in love with Italy and stayed. I moved to Bologna and lived in Bologna for 2 years, writing about food and doing PR for Italian wine. And then I came back.
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it was not terrible.
Yeah. I can't imagine
Yeah, that
writing
was
and hanging out in
it was
Bologna.
yeah, Bologna
It's a
in
cool food
northern
city, right?
Italy. I'm sorry?
It's a cool food city, right? Like,
Yeah, Bologna is actually called, one of the nicknames of Bologna is La Grassa, the fat.
Yeah.
So, you know,
right.
you can imagine. It's also like the capital of gelato, which is amazing. Like all of the
Huh.
equipment in Italy where they make gelato comes from that
Bologna.
area. So it's like secretly like the best gelato in Italy, which was a perk I didn't know about.
I had no idea. And also, I mean, there's Bolognese, and there's also, isn't that a region where there's a lot of hams and cheeses? Like
Yeah, so
Parma
that's
is outside of that, and
the region where Parmigiano Reggiano comes from, where prosciutto di Parma comes from, balsamic vinegar. Yeah, really a very rich food region.
cool.
Wow.
So yeah, so I was living there for 2 years, and then I came back to New York and was on Good Food Jobs, actually, which is a website. It's a job search engine that was founded by an alum of my university, Taylor Kokelis, and she set up this website where people can post jobs and look for jobs in sustainable food. And I found this, and it was like so much of what I loved about living in Italy, really learning about people through food, which is what the League of Kitchens is, as much as it is about learning about cooking. It's really about learning the stories of other people and getting to know a culture through that food.
Right, which is why it's such a innovative and cool concept, because it's not just a cooking class. You can take cooking classes at Sur La Table, or you can take, there's actually quite a few startups. I used to work for one where you learn to cook, either at an established organization like Sur La Table or in the chef's home. There are a lot of organizations like that, but the League of Kitchens is a different sort of project because there's so much more culture, there's so much more experience being communicated than just knife skills or, how to stew. It's like the knife skills of generations of Japanese chefs distilled in this one class, or, fill in the blank cuisine.
Absolutely. And I think for that reason, I really recommend it to people who I wouldn't recommend another cooking class to, because
Right.
I think just as many people go to have a day in which they spend an afternoon in the apartment of a person who comes from a completely different culture and is really excited to share that and share her own immigration story. So it's as much about learning what it is to be an immigrant in New York City and learning what it is to have left this other culture and what of that culture you bring to your life in New York City, and learning about her life and her childhood growing up in her culture. So yes, people come because they're psyched to learn how to cook awesome Japanese food or awesome Argentinian food, but I think equally people come who would not take another cooking class, who are here for the cultural experience.
How do guests find you?
It is largely word of mouth. I would say it's pretty much split between word of mouth and press. We've been really fortunate to have, as you mentioned, some pretty high profile press, both in New York City and nationally. We're also starting to build up our presence on TripAdvisor and Yelp, which I think is bringing in people from outside the city who are looking for an off the beaten path experience to have. But we don't advertise. So it's really people who are looking for it or who know someone who's had the experience before.
That's amazing. And it's definitely a very different. New York is there are a lot of cultural experiences. It's a city of museums. It's a city of art and theater and amazing food. But a lot of it is restaurant food. There's like a lot of, you can get almost any quote unquote
Right.
ethnic or cultural cuisine in that city. One thing I heard Lisa say, she's done a lot of really cool, was at a TEDx speech lecture she gave, and she has spoken at the Tenement Museum in New York. I forget exactly which one it was, but she mentioned that home cooking, which is what the instructors of League of Kitchens specialize in, as compared to restaurant cooking, is quote unquote the fullest expression of many cuisines. Can we unpack that a little, or what do you think about that?
Sure. So, I mean, in all of our workshops, there's always some dishes that people are familiar with from restaurants. But I think when you say it's the fullest the fullest expression of a cuisine, it means two things. One is that there are dishes that you make at home that you don't serve in restaurants, and I think that's true for every cuisine. But also that that it goes beyond the food, that there's a discussion of culture and an understanding of the cuisine that is tied to culture that you would never get in a restaurant. I think a great example of this is our Argentinian instructor. So our Argentinian instructor, Mirta, her grandfather is of Italian descent. And something that I learned from meeting Mirta is that over 60% of the population in Argentina is of Italian descent. It was actually more than Spanish descent.
Wow.
So she has one menu that I think is what you would think of as Argentinian food. It's like lots of sausages, steak, chimichurri, and sort of what you would have in mind, and probably maybe what you could find in an Argentinian restaurant. Her second menu is really a wonderful highlight of her Italian heritage. So she makes gnocchi with pesto and roast beef and this northern Italian dessert called salami di chocolate. And I learned that apparently in Argentina, the whole country eats gnocchi on the 29th of every month. And gnocchi is an Italian pasta made with potatoes that came with 19th century immigration to Argentina. And at the end of the month, when it's before payday and everyone's a little short on cash, gnocchi is a dish that's just flour and potatoes, so it's filling and really cheap. And it also is the Saint's Day. It's the canonization of Saint Pantaleo, I think. So it's also like a celebration of him. But if you went to a restaurant in Argentina, even if you got gnocchi with pesto in an Argentinian restaurant, you would never get that story.
Right.
Right.
And
you wouldn't
you'd probably be
understand.
like, what's this Italian pasta doing on this menu?
Right. I was actually in Argentina on the right after Christmas on the 29th of December. I didn't get gnocchi. I feel like I didn't get the full experience. If I had been in somebody's home, maybe I would have, gotten to experience that.
Yeah. And so that's just one example. And obviously every cuisine has dishes that aren't what you would eat in a restaurant, but are amazing and are what people really eat at home on a normal day.
Yeah, that's I like that, and I think that I was listening to a different podcast, The Sporkful, Dan Pashman, and he talks about one dish kind of being a wedge into a cuisine, which is kind of what you say in restaurant cuisine. There's pad thai for Thai food, or there's the meat, steak and sausages for Argentine food. But once you get past that wedge and you really understand and you open up a full cuisine, then you get into a lot of the more in-depth home-cooked meals, like understanding that gnocchi and pesto is actually a historically Argentine dish with an Italian with Italian heritage. So, very interesting point.
Yeah, totally.
I'm curious. I read that there were something like 160 or 180 chefs who applied for this gig in the beginning, and 6 instructors were originally brought on. They all happen to be women. Are they all grandmothers? Do they all have families?
They all have families, though they are not all grandmothers.
Okay. So Lisa had talked about the iconic Korean grandmother to teach her how to make Korean food. I'm curious about the dynamics of that, and I mean, maybe we can just get into it. Why is it women specifically, and elderly women, or above a certain age? I don't think there are any women younger than 30 who are doing this.
Yes.
Was that a conscious decision, or was that these are the people who we felt really know the cuisine, and these are the people whose homes we want to go into and want to invite our guests into?
Yeah, that's a great question, and people ask us about that a lot. And the age and gender are sort of two different issues, though it's all sort of tied together. In terms of it being women, there were men in the original applicant pool. None of them were the right fit. So it's not that it was conscious to be only women. I would say since then, so we've been recruiting over the past year. So this year we hired 2 new instructors, our Uzbek instructor and our Japanese instructor. And we're in a current recruiting push right now to try to get 2 to 3 more instructors. And I do most of the recruiting. And I would say that I have talked to several candidates that seem very promising. A couple of Burmese men, a couple of Korean men, and no men have ever come to the information session, which is like the first step in the hiring process. We do an info session with, it's like an informal interview, and the candidates can ask questions. So I'd say outside of that original pool, we actually haven't had any serious candidates come to us who were
Interesting.
men.
So it's
and
somewhat self-selecting too. It's who was interested in becoming involved.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And, I think that is because a lot of the cultures where immigrants come from in New York City, home cooking is traditionally and still done by women.
Right.
And professional cooking, as is historical, professional cooking is done by men outside the home, and home cooking is done by women. And so, obviously there are many, many fabulous immigrant chefs working in every New York City restaurant.
Right.
But that's what distinguishes our cooks, is that it's honoring and recognizing the knowledge and the skills of a home cook and not of a professional cook, which are acknowledged and recognized not always fairly and perhaps rarely fairly in other ways. So I would say it's largely self-selective. We have had male candidates that just haven't been the right fit. I mean, if I could get an Italian grandpa, I think that would be amazing. If there are any Italian grandpas listening, that would be amazing. We just haven't found that person.
We'll target some Italian grandpas in our marketing for this podcast, and if they're listening in, they'll contact you. Yeah,
I'm waiting for that. My mom used to tell me stories. My mom's a third generation Italian, and she used to tell me stories about her grandfather coming home to their apartment in Bensonhurst with a bag of live eels and beating them in the kitchen so that her grandmother could then boil them. And I'm like, where is that guy with the eels?
Yeah.
So what's a good fit when you think about a chef for the League of... What's
a good fit? Yeah, so just to answer that, I'll start with the sort of age question, is that it's not so much about age as it's about experience. So what we are offering our students is the experience and knowledge of a really expert home cook that just takes time to develop, and it takes someone who has learned from that tradition and is cooking in a very traditional way. So for the most part, that correlates with age. You just become a really experienced home cook by living longer and cooking more. One really notable exception is our Argentinian instructor, Noita. She, I think, started teaching with us when she was 35 or 36. But when she lived with her in-laws in Pakistan, cooked 3 meals a day for a household of 30 people. Wow. So if you're doing that every day, that's a lifetime of cooking for most people. So she really has amazing cooking experience. But for the most part, we're not just looking for somebody who's a great cook. We're looking for somebody who has a knowledge of traditional cooking methods that you can't find by Googling a Thai recipe or Googling how to make miso soup. Really somebody who has learned the tradition and has it in their body. And that's why our instructors tend to be older. The other things that we're looking for, obviously great cooks, somebody who's really attentive to the process and the ingredients. So doing things in a traditional way, doing things in a way that's from scratch when that's appropriate. And also a personality of being welcoming and hospitable, and somebody who wants to have 6 strangers in their home to share their culture and their cuisine and their personal stories with. And that is very difficult to find, that combination of qualities, is that there's many people who are fantastic cooks, but it's just not there.
They're not
super psyched to have 6 strangers.
Right. I really enjoyed the Stephen Colbert episode. Yamini is just so welcoming and so warm and so funny, and like, plays with Colbert is obviously like doing his thing and being funny, and Yamini doesn't miss a beat. She's just like with him the whole time, and it's so fun. And I want to meet her, and I want to spend time with her, and I just want to like cook with her for a half day. And I'm guessing that all of the chefs have that same warmth and like positivity and are welcoming. And I think from my outsider perspective, you've done an incredible job bringing on these women who are so, I don't know, the grandmother that I, had and want again.
Yeah. I mean, our instructors are exceptional, and we're looking for really exceptional people. And I think that, as you said, one of the things that our students really learn in the workshop is to observe that other cultures have another way of treating people. I'm not sure that level of welcoming is something that Americans are always the best at, to leave aside any current immigration political discussion. But to be in a space and see somebody who just unconditionally welcomes you and treats you as an honored guest in their home when they don't know you is, I think, a really important experience to have, and makes you think a little bit about our own hospitality.
Right.
Yeah, how is the current, we don't have to get too much into politics, but how is the current immigration debate, has that brought more press or more guests to League of Kitchens with an interest in changing the conversation or bringing in a new component of the conversation and saying, like, let's not just like badmouth immigrants, because there are so many stories that are not being told if you just kind of stop at that superficial level.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that has come up in our recent press. I mean, even in the and Stephen Colbert sort of played with this in his piece a little bit too, is that immigration is in the news all the time, and it's very easy to otherize immigrants as like a monolithic, homogeneous group of people who are coming to take our jobs. And I think what's the most powerful experience about the League of Kitchens is, anytime you put a person and a story and a personal experience to a culture, you can't ever look at that culture the same way again. A great example of this is our Uzbek instructor. We did not intend to hire an Uzbek instructor. We didn't know anything about Uzbek food. Demira came to us in our info session and was just amazing, and her food is wonderful. And I feel like I have a personal connection to Uzbek culture that it will never be this outside, unknown, enigmatic thing again to me. And I think that the more that we can put that personal connection to other cultures changes the way that we think about immigration and changes the way that we think about immigrants. And, in New York City, you get on the subway and it's just filled with people from other cultures. And if you start to have personal experiences with people from those cultures, it becomes like a subway full of people just like the instructor that you just spent the day with. It really makes you realize that these people all have incredible stories and have done something in their lives by moving their families from one culture to another that is incredibly difficult, incredibly challenging, honorable, and that's really fascinating, and that it makes you curious about that instead of just a crowd of foreigners.
Right. You talked a little bit about the experience that someone needs to become an instructor for the League of Kitchens. What about once they're hired? What sort of training do the chefs get?
Yeah, so we have our training process usually takes about 2 months, and it's a series of meetings and also in-home training. So we do some meetings with them where we talk about menu development. So we help them put together a menu of 5 or 6 dishes that makes sense together as a meal, that is going to fit within the timeline, that's like interesting, has a range of of techniques, some dishes that are simple, some that are more challenging. So we help them develop that. And then we talk a lot about facilitating a group, because most of our instructors are fantastic cooks, but they've never taught before, or they've never taught cooking before. So helping them craft their introduction and how they will introduce themselves to the group, how they will get the group to start to interact with each other, what to do in difficult situations, like if two students who know each other are just talking the whole time and sort of disrupting things, or if somebody says something culturally inappropriate. So we go through all these scenarios of what to do and how to handle them. And then we do, we have a professional recipe developer who comes to their apartment and writes down all of their recipes. So most of our instructors do not have written recipes, and if they do, they're not in English. And so we have a professional recipe writer who comes and literally like catches the salt before the instructor puts it into the pot of water and measures that. So everything that she does by feel, we can write down so that our students will go away with the recipes. So we do that in the training process. And then the best way for the new instructors to get a sense of how the workshops run is to go and take them. So they typically take 2 workshops just as if they were students with our experienced instructors. And that really lets them see the flow and they get to learn how to handle different situations with students really practically. And then they do 2 practice workshops that we fill with our very fortunate friends and family members who just come and do the workshop as if it were real. And they do 2 of those. So we really want them to be ready, to feel really confident before.
How long
does
the training take? Is it a couple of weeks, up to a month?
It ends up taking 2 months because we have to schedule 2 trips, 2 days with the professional recipe developer. We also, there's a day when I go with the instructors to all of their shops where they get all their ingredients. And I write down everything they buy for the recipes, but also things that they buy just as snacks. So that our students, if they want to recreate the dishes and don't know where to buy the ingredients, will have a shopping guide and know where they can get things. And then they observe 2 workshops and then they do 2 practice workshops. So it ends up taking about 2 months.
I'm curious about, so newer instructors get invited to classes with experienced instructors. And I also think I read or heard that you guys bring all the chef instructors together once in a while to, just kind of hang out and socialize. Mm-hmm. What do they talk about, or how is that engagement? Do they all connect on being immigrants or being cooks, or do they talk about food, or do they talk about family? Like what's the dynamic
there? Yeah, so we do group meetings about once every 6 to 8 weeks. And it starts out being like the greatest potluck that you can imagine. So everyone brings a dish. So we spend a while bonding over food, and I kind of hide the dish that I brought in one corner so that nobody asks about it.
I'm sure you can bring some pretty good Italian stuff with your background.
I could, but it's really hard to hold a candle to what these women make. So I try to keep it low key. So we spend about an hour just. Really, everyone is so fascinated by each other's food because, a lot of them, especially if they haven't been in New York for very long, have not tried a lot of other ethnic foods. And this is, being a part of League of Kitchens allows them to try the food of a lot of different cultures. So that's a major aspect. And then I would say that they really also bond about their families. They're all mothers and some are grandmothers. So they get really excited about seeing pictures of each other's children or grandchildren or news about their families. And then they talk a lot about their workshops, and it's really nice to see the pride that they take in it and share their successes. So they talk a lot about students who were super enthusiastic, who ate all the food and then there was no leftovers, or who sent them cards or flowers after the workshop. And that's something that they're really proud of, and it's really nice for them to share that with each other and feel part of a community that's having these successes.
Yeah, I would love to go to one of those potlucks someday.
It's awesome.
Probably wouldn't. Yeah, I'd be embarrassed to bring any home cooked food, but would love to taste everybody else's and share. Let's take a little break here, and we'll be back for more conversation with Megan. Maybe delve into some topics of diplomacy and food. So stay tuned.
And we're back. Let's talk a little bit about culinary diplomacy, Megan. We can define culinary diplomacy simply as using food as a tool to improve international and intercultural relations. Do you think that the League of Kitchens as an organization practices culinary diplomacy?
I mean, I think that's possibly as important a mission of ours as is preserving cooking knowledge.
Okay.
Well, I don't know, that's not like our stated goal. If you go on our website, it's not like, hey, culinary diplomacy, but it's sort of, that's like the underwriting principle is, along with the passing on of this food knowledge, is getting to know a culture through its food. And that, in a lot of ways, it's like sort of the best like secret way to get people to get along without like telling them like, now you're going to learn about another culture. It happens so naturally over food that we don't really have to do anything to make that happen other than set everybody up to succeed. So by setting our instructors up to deliver really excellent workshops and by preparing our students for the experience that they are about to have, the experience ends up being fantastic, and that happens naturally over food, the way that everybody gets to know each other over food.
Yeah, I heard from someone very intelligent once that food is a very low-hanging fruit. It's like food is easy to talk about, or as you say, the first hour of discussion at one of these get-togethers, at one of these potlucks, is just about each other's food, and after an hour of discussion, almost anybody can be friends. Almost anybody can start talking about family or friends or living conditions or even politics. So it's cool that that's kind of the undercurrent of everything that you guys do. I'm curious, do the chefs, or what do you think they are involved, or their mission is?
So I think that varies a little bit by person. I think that some of our instructors are very focused on the food aspect of it and very interested in helping students be able to reproduce an authentic version of their cuisine. Others really see themselves as a cultural ambassador, and our Uzbek instructor is a great example of that. She starts off the workshop basically explaining what Uzbekistan is because she assumes that people don't know where it is, don't know anything about the culture, and so she just starts that out. And her husband is actually a professor of Uzbek history, and as a result is just this treasure trove of information about Uzbekistan. And her son in Uzbekistan was a tour guide, and it was rated the best tour guide in Central Asia, which is
cool.
Yeah, so when he's around after the workshop, he does a little like PowerPoint presentation about Uzbekistan, and she really sees herself as wanting Uzbek culture to become a part of the fabric of New York City the way that Chinese culture, Italian culture, Irish culture is. And she's like, I am bringing a little bit of Uzbekistan to New York and like getting people to know that. And it's just like the most, I could like get emotional thinking about it. It's like the most moving thing to see that she won the green card lottery and like came over to New York City with her husband and said, it was like, I'm starting a new life. And now you get to know Uzbekistan by meeting this woman. And it's like, it's just a surprising thing that none of us could have predicted.
Right.
That's great.
I really love on your website, which is leagueofkitchens.com for all of you who are interested in looking up some courses. Each of the instructors has a little quote, and that quote it seems, I don't know the chefs, but it seems to crystallize how they go into this. So Aiko, the Japanese chef, says, "I believe in using a light touch to bring out the purest tastes of the freshest ingredients." It sounds like to me, she's interested in the food and, preserving the cooking knowledge and the tradition. Where Damira, the Uzbek chef, says, "The most important ingredient to cook with is love, because I love the process of cooking, and all the people I cook for, everything tastes good." So her guiding influence, based on your story in this, is that she really just wants to spread the love and the good cuisine and the culture of Uzbek hospitality. So I really, if you're listening, you should go to the website leagueofkitchens.com/instructors and just see what all these chefs have to say. It's really cool.
Yeah, and it's amazing to see how they bring their culture to the approach to their workshop as well. And you enter into their home and you feel not like you're walking into a cooking workshop. You feel like you're entering into another cultural space.
Right. We were curious when Kelsey and I were talking about this beforehand. Do you have follow-up discussions with guests? Like, do you get feedback besides Yelp reviews and TripAdvisor reviews? What sort of feedback or responses do you get? It sounds like guests do things like send chefs letters and flowers and stuff, so that must feel pretty good for you and for the chefs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we do a post-workshop survey that we send out to all of our students, and some of it is just helpful feedback for us about, like, did you learn something new? Are you likely to try this again? Did this make you feel like you want to take another workshop? How did you find out about us? Like, sort of that kind of information. And so we get, I would say, everybody's different, but 90% of the feedback is really, really positive. It often speaks to the sort of experience of and like the cultural sharing and also the experience of the day. And people say things like, "This is such a memorable day that I had in the workshop." Some people come back for more workshops, and those are either people who really love the experience or are really interested in learning how to make all of these different cuisines, and so they are going to be doing it again. And we also get people who just informally email us to say like what a fantastic experience it was for them.
Have you heard that guests are likely to go home and at least attempt to make some of these dishes?
Or go to the places?
Or go to the
like grocery stores.
Grocery stores, yeah.
Right. So we do hear from guests, from some students, that they have recreated the dishes, and sometimes they'll write in and say, like, "I just wanted to tell you, I just made this." Often they end up exchanging contact information with the instructors at the end of the workshop, because we handle all of the registrations. So the instructors and the students don't get the instructor's contact information unless the instructor chooses to share it. But they often do, because by the end of the workshop, they feel like friends. So often they will directly tell the instructors, "Oh, I made your hummus last week," or I made miso soup or whatever. So we do we don't have a formal way of capturing that. We don't like follow up 6 months later and say, "What have you been cooking?" But we do sort of informally get that feedback. In terms of shopping, I think my sense is that students probably don't go to the stores too often, because the reality is a lot of our workshops are in the outer boroughs.
Right.
So
I think I heard Lisa say something like Queens is the most diverse city in the world, at least in the country, in the world maybe.
I think in the world.
Like the most number of languages and the most number of the most immigrants. So that's incredible.
Yeah, it is. Wow. It's amazing.
Are most of the chefs? Are most of the instructors in Queens?
About half of them are in Queens. Yeah. So if you really want to make the dish and want to go back to where you can get the ingredients, you could take a trip out there. My sense is that most people probably take the recipes and see what they can find around them and find ways to maybe make it in a way that works for them. Right. So some of our recipes are very simple, and you could like easily make them at home. A lot of our Greek instructors' recipes are really fantastic ingredients, and you make very fresh preparations. Also, our Uzbek instructor, I've made her mashurda, which is like a mung bean soup. It's very easy to find the ingredients. Other things are much more complicated and would require a more ambitious chef than I am, which is done on purpose. So we want it to be accessible to people who are really in it for the cultural experience, but also interesting and challenging to people who are great cooks and want to know how to make. Like our Bengali instructor makes a chicken curry that is phenomenal and very complicated and has a lot of ingredients.
Right. I also like the idea of which beer snacks, or just like snacks in general, all these chefs are picking up, because I don't know, it's fun to like have a bunch of random snacks on hand. And when you're cooking, I always like, I'm eating something random. And if I'm cooking Chinese food, I really like having like, I found this really cool Szechuan peanut that has both that spicy and numbing peppercorn. And that's just like such a fun beer snack that I wouldn't have known about had I not met a Chinese chef. So that's a fun extra.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, you go into a little ethnic grocery store, and there's all of these things where you're like, what is this? Yeah. Our Uzbek instructor showed us that they eat these fried, it's like the pit of an apricot.
Whoa.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, they're everywhere. And if she hadn't pointed that out, I would have no idea what that was.
Kelsey, have you had that?
Yeah, we had them. I used to live in Kyrgyzstan, so the cuisine is a little bit similar, and you could get them off the street.
Yeah.
Delicious.
Is it the same as, the pit of an apricot, like the pit or the inner pit? Like if you split it open, there's that little almond thing?
I think it's the inner pit, so it's like the actual seed.
I thought that was poisonous. I thought that was, like bitter almond is a flavoring that's used often in Europe, but I thought there was some sort of some poison that is in a very small dose. But maybe if you fry it, it takes out the poison, or I have no idea.
You might not be wrong. This sounds vaguely familiar.
Who knows?
Just cook it in the traditional way, and you want that.
Right, exactly.
Right. Don't eat too many.
Right. So, Megan, one more question. Our listeners, everyone wants to know when League of Kitchens is coming to their city. Like, I really want to take any of these classes. They all sound incredible. Are there plans for expansion? Do you think this concept could translate to other cities, or is New York such a unique and single destination in the world, because a place like Queens is so diverse, that it couldn't really work in a different city as it currently is?
I mean, I think it could definitely work in other cities. It would probably look a little bit different depending on the immigrant makeup and transportation sort of setup of other cities. New York is the perfect place for this, because it's compact, it's easy to get around, it's easy
very
to
connected.
It's easy to get to the places where immigrants live, and there's like people from all over the world. So I think it's sort of a natural place, but there's plenty of cities I could think of that would be really rich grounds for this. Atlanta, Boston. And I get emails probably on a weekly basis from people saying, bring this to Toledo. Like, places I would not even have thought.
Right.
So I think there is a hope in the future that we could do that. There is not immediate plans to do this. Like I said, we've been in operation for a little over 2 years, so I think it's early in that process to think about expanding to other cities before we really establish ourselves in New York. But we do have plans for a cookbook.
Oh, great. I was about to ask that.
Yeah, so we have a proposal that is out there, waiting to be picked up. So if anybody is looking for a cookbook to publish, we have a proposal that would be recipes from all of our instructors. So that's sort of the immediate way that people might be able to access League of Kitchens without having it in their city yet. But I hope that someday it does spread, because I think the interest is there, and I think there's a lot of cities where this would not only work but probably go a long way as a culinary diplomacy project, which is obviously something we need in New York, but I think it's probably something that other cities need as much, if not more so.
For integration.
Yeah.
So we ask this question at the end of every podcast that we do. And so I want to ask you, what is your universal truth about food?
Wow, what is my universal truth about food?
Yeah.
Wow. What comes to mind first, I don't know if this is my universal truth about food, but what comes to mind first is that the way that you speak of someone else's food is hugely important in your relationship to that person. So it doesn't matter like what culture you come from or who you are, appreciating someone's food forges a bond with you, and denigrating their food is like the fastest way to make an enemy.
Wow.
And I've experienced this in like many different contexts and many different cultures and countries. Personally, when I lived in Italy for 3 years, and people would say like American food is terrible or there is no American food. And you're just like, wow, dude, you just like hit me.
We're at the deepest.
Like, like, what is that about?
Right.
Like, you have no food? I mean, it's like the worst insult.
The worst insult.
Yeah. And I think that's universal, just showing someone appreciation for their food cuts through like any kind of language divide. Don't have to really say anything. You just have to eat it and smile. And like people feel like you're open to them. And I think, that's what we're trying to do with League of Kitchens. And I think that bears itself out in every interaction you have with food over your life.
Great. We haven't heard that in
response.
14 episodes. That response. So that's
very unique.
And I'll be thinking about that for a little while. The fastest way to make an enemy is to denigrate their cuisine.
Yeah.
Tweetable.
That's interesting.
Yeah, tweet that.
So thank you so much, Megan. It's been such a pleasure talking to you today and learning more about League of Kitchens.
Thank you guys. This was great.
Yeah, I really hope to make it to New York very soon and take one of these classes. They all sound great. I don't know how I would choose. I might have to take all 9 instructors. Collect all 9. So yeah, thanks again. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you, guys.
And thank you for listening to The Culinary Citizen today. You, as always, can connect with us on our Facebook page, The Culinary Citizen. You can also subscribe to the podcast and listen on iTunes. Don't forget to leave a review if you like what you have heard. If you ever want to reach us, that's Kelsey or myself, you can find us on Twitter. Kelsey, what's your handle?
At KELSEYJMAHER.
That's KJ Mar, as in Kelsey J. Mar. I'm at Culinary Diplo, Culinary Diplomacy for short, Culinary Diplo. If you ever want to reach us by email, feel free to send us an email at culinarycitizen@gmail.com. And we look forward to the next episode. So until next time.